5 days of preseason testing in Barcelona drew to a close with the familiar end-of-week hush settling over the pit lane. Mechanics were rolling toolboxes back into the garages, engineers hunched over laptops for one last data sweep, and the winter sun was already dropping behind the grandstands. Every team could point to small victories and nagging problems, but as the paddock began to pack up, one story towered above the rest. It wasn't a new aerodynamic trick from Mercedes or Ferrari that people were talking about. It was the sound coming from inside the Red Bull garage. The sound of a brand new engine that had, against most expectations, run almost flawlessly. For years, Red Bull's dominance had been powered by Honda engines, a partnership that turned them into the benchmark of the modern hybrid era. But the sweeping power unit regulations for 2026 forced everyone to rethink their approach. Red Bull did more than just rethink, they gambled. Instead of continuing as a customer team, they decided to become an engine manufacturer in their own right, creating a brand new division in Milton Keynes, Red Bull Powertrains. In partnership with Ford, they would design and build their own power unit from scratch for the first time in the team's history. On paper, it was a monumental risk. Engine programs are brutally complex and ruinously expensive. They demand expertise in combustion, turbocharging, hybrid systems, batteries, control electronics, software, and packaging, fields that manufacturers like Mercedes, Ferrari, and Honda had spent decades refining. Red Bull were famed for their chassis and aerodynamics, not for what sat behind the driver's seat. Many in the paddock viewed RBPT as the great unknown of the new era. Could a team that had never built an F1 engine really go toe-to-toe with firms who existed purely to make engines? Or would their ambitious project be exposed in testing, with broken parts and red flags telling the true story? When the lights turned green at the end of the pit lane on Monday morning, most observers expected Red Bull to take a cautious approach. New engines almost always start their life tentatively. The first day is usually spent creeping around on low power, running short installation stints, checking temperatures, pressures, and electrical systems, and praying that nothing catastrophic happens. With thousands of moving parts and a radically different energy recovery architecture under the new rules, failure is more common than success in those initial runs. Instead, the opposite happened. The first man entrusted with Red Bull's RB22, powered by the new Red Bull Ford unit, was young junior driver Isack Hadjar. He rolled out of the garage for his first laps in an atmosphere thick with anticipation. The expectation was that he'd circle the track a handful of times, return to the pits, and let the engineers dissect every trace of data before daring to run again. But the car kept circulating, and then kept circulating some more. By the end of that opening day, Hadjar had racked up more than 100 laps, more than a full Grand Prix distance and then some, without a significant mechanical failure. Even more startling, his name sat at the top of the timing screens. The fastest lap of day one belonged to the brand new car with the brand new power unit that was supposed to be Red Bull's biggest question mark. Hadjar himself seemed almost taken aback by what he'd just experienced. Speaking afterwards, he admitted that the team had braced for teething problems and limited running. Instead, the program flowed almost uninterrupted. They completed a lot more laps than we expected, he said, describing the day as surprisingly smooth. There were only minor issues, nothing more than tiny glitches you would expect on any car's first proper outing. For a team switching from a proven Honda engine to its first self-built unit, that level of reliability on day one bordered on the extraordinary. The surprise wasn't confined to the reigning champion's garage. Red Bull's sister outfit, Racing Bulls, was also running the new Red Bull Ford power unit, and their experience mirrored the senior team's. Liam Lawson climbed into the Racing Bulls car for his first taste of the engine and quickly added his own pile of laps to the mileage total. By the time he climbed out of the cockpit, 88 laps were on the board. all completed without the kind of major failures that usually haunt debutante powertrains. Lawson's verdict was simple and emphatic. Reliability, he said, was the headline. They had logged a good amount of laps, and the only stoppages they suffered were down to precautionary checks rather than genuine mechanical breakdowns. On the power unit side, he concluded, things had been very, very good, a phrase that, coming from a driver used to the quirks and moods of modern hybrid systems, carried real weight. Alan Permain, Racing Bull's experienced team principal and a veteran of countless pre-season tests with multiple teams, offered a similarly positive assessment. He has seen new engines arrive with great fanfare only to spend days leaking fluids, tripping fault codes, or refusing to start. In that context, he freely admitted that the smoothness of the Red Bull Ford unit was pleasantly surprising. When the engineers finally printed out the mileage sheets from the first day, their significance became obvious. Taken together, the two Red Bull-powered teams had completed a distance broadly in line with, and in some cases exceeding, the established engine manufacturers. They had covered more ground than Audi, whose own new project had been in development for years, yet struggled badly in Spain, and comfortably outran Honda, who did not even make it onto the circuit on day one. As the week wore on, that early impression solidified into hard evidence. By the end of the fifth day, the Red Bull-powered cars had chalked up more than 622 laps, close to 3,000 kilometers of running. Mercedes and Ferrari powered outfits still led the way on absolute mileage, as you'd expect from long-standing programs already refined over several seasons. But for a brand-new two-team engine project to reach that kind of distance without a major public failure was exceptional. Where many had expected the RBPT logo to appear alongside session-stopping red flags, it appeared instead at the top of reliability charts circulated around the paddock. Perhaps the most telling praise came not from inside the Red Bull camp, but from a direct rival. George Russell, driver for Mercedes, and someone thoroughly acquainted with what a dominant engine feels like from the cockpit, spent much of his spare time watching the new contenders. He highlighted the Red Bull power unit in particular, noting how many laps it had managed on its debut appearance. For a first attempt at building an F1 engine, he said, they had clearly done a good job. He described the program as impressive and quite surprising, especially when compared with the difficulties faced by other new manufacturers. In a sport where rivals are normally reluctant to publicly praise one another, such comments were a powerful endorsement. Reliability alone, though, is not enough to win races. An engine that never breaks but delivers its power in crude, unpredictable bursts can turn even a brilliant chassis into a nervous, clumsy machine. Under the 2026 regulations, this issue of drivability becomes even more acute. With the removal of the MGUH and a much larger electric motor contributing half of the total power, the way energy is harvested, stored, and deployed is fiendishly complicated. The driver's throttle pedal no longer just calls for fuel. It requests a coordinated response from internal combustion, turbocharging, and battery systems all at once. If that response is jerky, delayed, or inconsistent, the car can become a nightmare to drive at the limit. On this front as well, early feedback on the Red Bull Ford unit was strikingly positive. Max Verstappen, the triple world champion whose sensitivity to car behavior is legendary within the team, reported that they had hit the ground running quite well with the new engine. His words were measured. As always in testing, no one wants to declare victory in February, but the underlying message was optimistic. According to those who drove it, the power delivery felt smooth, predictable, and controllable, with none of the violent surges or dead spots that sometimes plague early hybrid systems. Tim Goss, Racing Bull's chief technical officer and another seasoned observer of F1 power units, went even further, summarizing the drivability as simply fantastic. That single phrase carried enormous technical implications. A fantastic engine in this context is not just about raw horsepower. It is about how seamlessly combustion and electric power blend together. how efficiently energy is harvested under braking, and how precisely the torque can be modulated through the rear tires. A smooth, linear response allows drivers to lean on the car's grip, to attack braking zones and corner exits with confidence. Over a race distance, that confidence is worth tenths of a second per lap, a margin that can separate champions from the chasing pack. The week was not completely flawless for Red Bull. On the second day, Isaac Hadjar put the RB22 into the barriers in wet conditions, inflicting substantial damage to the chassis. The incident cost the team valuable track time as the mechanics rebuilt the car, and for a while the garage door remained firmly shut while others continued to log laps. Crucially, however, the crash was quickly identified as a straightforward driver error rather than any mechanical or software failure. The power unit itself had not missed a beat. In a sense, that was its own kind of compliment. The biggest setback of the week for Red Bull's daring new engine project had nothing to do with the engine at all. As the teams began to ship their freight to the first race, the broader implications of Red Bull's strong start became impossible to ignore. For the best part of a decade, the benchmark power units in Formula One had come from Mercedes and Ferrari. Even Red Bull, during their period of success with Honda, remained fundamentally a customer, dependent on another company for the heart of their car. That dependence imposed limitations. The engine was a given, a fixed object around which the chassis designers had to compromise. With Red Bull powertrains now fully operational, that relationship has changed. Red Bull has joined the elite circle of genuine works teams, capable of developing their chassis and engine in lockstep. The benefits of that integration are profound, and every pipe, cable, and cooler can be placed where it best serves the airflow and weight distribution of the car. The shape of the gearbox casing, the position of the turbocharger, the layout of the energy store, all can be tuned to suit Adrian Newey's aerodynamic vision rather than wedged in because an external supplier says they must go there. This level of holistic design was one of the cornerstones of Mercedes's long period of dominance in the early hybrid era. Red Bull now has access to the same kind of advantage. The partnership with Ford adds another layer of strength. While Red Bull brings cutting-edge race car design and trackside operations, Ford contributes decades of experience in electric motors, battery technology, and control systems. Precisely the areas that gain importance under the 2026 rules. See, with a mandated 50-50 split between internal combustion and electrical power output, the hybrid system is no longer just a supporting act, it is half the show. Managing complex energy flows, minimizing losses, and ensuring consistent performance over a race distance becomes as crucial as extracting peak combustion efficiency. From the outside, it already looks as though the Red Bull-Ford alliance has found a promising formula, delivering a package that is not only reliable but also immediately drivable. Their success sends a clear signal to the rest of the paddock. It proves that a new manufacturer, if properly funded and intelligently staffed, can enter Formula One's ultra-demanding hybrid era and be competitive right from the start. For potential future entrants, that is an encouraging case study. For current competitors, it is a warning. Audi's painful week in Barcelona, with limited mileage and visible struggles, will only feel more uncomfortable when contrasted with Red Bull's apparently seamless debut. Seeing a rival hit the ground running with a first-ever engine, while your own long-term project limps through the test, is bound to trigger concern in boardrooms and design offices alike. By the time the paddock trucks rolled out of Barcelona, one conclusion was difficult to avoid. The bar for 2026 had been set, and it had been set high by a team that was already on top of the sport. Whether Red Bull's new power unit will allow them to dominate the coming era as comprehensively as they have dominated the last remains to be seen. Testing times and mileage figures are not championship points. But what was once considered their greatest vulnerability, the leap into engine manufacturing, now looks suspiciously like another potential strength. In a sport defined by tiny margins and ruthless competition, the rest of the field will have taken careful note.